that's my number one rule in working with people in emotionally immature narcissistic relationships, is that you have to have self-care. Because if you've been just spending all of your time trying to figure out what is wrong with me, or managing this person's emotions, or trying to buffer for the kids, then your emotional baseline is very low. So we raise that emotional baseline. The second thing I do is I say, get your PhD in gaslighting. Next is it's get out of unproductive conversations when you notice they're unproductive. And fourth, I talk about setting boundaries, and know that a boundary is a challenge for the emotionally immature, the narcissist. And I also like to talk about, boundary versus ultimatum. Ultimatum, you need to stop doing this. Boundary, if you do this, then I will, fill in the blank. But the reason I'm laying this whole thing out is that then that last thing I say is that you'll never give that person the aha moment or the epiphany. And so when you're looking at those different things, you'll find that the person that's in the relationship that's trying to figure it out, and they just read narcissist run, then that's where I'm saying, all right, let's slow our roll a little bit, and let's just start working on your emotional baselines, figure out that gaslighting. Let's get you out of those unproductive conversations, learn how to set a healthy boundary, and then look at how often you're trying to say, but you don't understand, but you just need to do this, but last time you said this, and trying to give them the aha moment or the epiphany. And the irony here is that if you do all of those things, then there's a chance that that will change the dynamic of the relationship. But more than likely, you'll start to recognize the unhealthy relationship as it is, that it isn't a you thing necessarily, or that actually the harder that you've been working of trying to prove it, trying to not take care of yourself, that's put you in this position that you're in. And so, and I'm going to go overly generalized here, but so a lot of times by the time people get to that point, then they realize, oh, I think I probably need to leave the relationship if it's not viable, if it's unhealthy. And at that point, then they're like, I should have just gone when I first read the word narcissist, and so then they write the book, and the cycle repeats. So that's where I felt like, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah. That sparks so many different things. That idea of having a baseline for where you're at emotionally, and having to almost get up to that spot where if you take that person that is in that like really, really like rock bottom low, right?
Yeah.
We think about it all the time through the lens of like the different themes like shame and judgment, and all these different, aspects of emotional things that we'll embody and that we'll be kind of processing through. And the things that are needed to kind of go up a level don't really apply when you're down there at the bottom. And so all that, like you said, mindfulness and, going for a walk, or have you thought about doing this or trying that?
Right.
It's just not a skill or a tool that's really applicable for people in those states because they don't have access to it. There was one other thing that was sparking for me that I wanted to bring up, or that I wanted to mention, and I'm not going to find it now.
If I start talking, you'll remember it. That's the way it works in my practice, So right. Please cut me. But I like what you're saying there, because that I just think that isn't talked about enough, is that when that baseline is low, then it actually, I think it has in essence a net negative effect when even the most well-meaning people are saying, hey, how about you just go for a walk? How about you just take some time for yourself? Or, why don't you start a mindfulness or practice, or go to a yoga studio? And then when the person feels like I can't even get out of bed, then they say, man, I really am broken because I can't even do these things that I want to do that I know would help. What's wrong with me? And they just kind of keep like falling back in on themselves. And that's part that just breaks my heart. And I'll watch people do that. So for sometimes a pretty lengthy period of time. And from the therapist standpoint, it really is just a time to drop back down into empathy. Just tell me about that. What is that like? Because people are so, I think they're starved to be heard and understood. And because you'll watch the person even express themselves and then fold back in on themselves and talk about, but I know I shouldn't be thinking this way, but I know, and that's where I love just being able to talk about the fact that, but check that out. That is something you're thinking. It just is. Let's talk about it. Tell me more. Yeah. I know. Did that work, Craig? Did you remember?
It did, absolutely.
Look at that.
It was in relationship to, because we talk obviously a lot about our relationship.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that is kind of the purpose of this podcast, is sharing our lived experience of growing and healing together over the past decade. And we're trying to show it through a lens as best as we can from like a vulnerable reality of this is kind of what we're going through and what we're experiencing, in hopes of holding up that mirror for people. And really early on in our journey and in our relationship together, we were trying to, navigate everything together in a sense. We were trying to approach everything together and look at everything together and work on things together. And even upwards into just a few years ago when we actually started to go to therapy together, right? The really, really big shifts and changes for both of us came when we started to address all of our individual
Yeah.
issues and all of our individual things first and foremost. Because what we learned over the years was it was just kind of like, we would stay in those cycles if we just continually tried to work them together. It's applying all of those tools and techniques that we might have heard about on a podcast or read
Yeah.
books about, or therapists would have talked to us about, but we weren't addressing all the unconscious underlying things but below the surface of it, right?
Yeah.
And so what do you find when you've got couples that are coming to you, or when you've worked with couples in the past, navigating that type of dynamic between two people who might not necessarily, like you said, right? You'd like to think in an ideal situation, everybody's coming to the table with
Yeah.
the hopes and dreams of, hey, we're going to fix things, we're going to heal together, and everything's going to be great. But the reality is it's much different than that. How do you get them to see that, hey, if you're not working on yourself, it's kind of, I don't want to say pointless, but I think it's fucking pointless to work on your relationship.
Oh, this is the greatest question, and I'll tell you, it's gonna lead to another lengthy answer, because this is. I know right before we went on air, I was just telling you, I love this stuff. I love this stuff so much, and I have been a couples therapist using this modality of emotionally focused therapy for my couples theory, EFT. It was developed by Sue Johnson. It's a lot of attachment based concepts, and I've been doing that for a decade. I mean, well over 1,000 couples. I've got a marriage course, the magnetic marriage course that I talk about this on, and I love everything about it. But there is a part of it that then kind of you get to this place where, okay, what do we do next? And then I thought, okay, what do you do next? And so I start looking into the world of differentiation, and then there are couples therapists that just work on being differentiated, which is this human need we have to have a connection with somebody while holding on to ourselves, or while learning about ourselves, or managing our own autonomy in the relationship, which can seem a little bit like a paradox. And then I start noticing, and this is again, all of this is a me thing. This is my experience, but I seem to find that I'll just say the EFT therapist, emotionally focused therapy therapist, and me and others, we're talking about this concept, these emotionally focused therapy concepts, and we're just building our whole foundation on this tool. And then I find that the differentiation therapists are working out of this differentiation lens. And so then I start thinking, man, if we all talk together, it's kind of like a Reese's peanut butter cup thing, the chocolate and the peanut butter, and it's amazing.
We were meant to be. We were meant to be.